Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the horror show, and also welcome back to Cecil's favorite horror movie from every year that he's been alive. I think I got that right. That's right. This is now a 4-part series. It was all intended to be one part together, all 40 years, but it ended up being over 2 hours, so I chopped it up, and now we are doing every decade, right? So the 80s, the 90s, the 2010s, and the aughts, and we are here to discuss the 90s. So, that being said, let's go ahead and get into my favorite horror movie of 1990. So 1990 was yet another big year for horror movies, including Flatliners, the original It, if you want to count that as not a TV movie, the original Nightbreed, not that there's a sequel, but I'm talking about original versus the director's cut. Of course, there was Gremlins 2, there was Hardware, there was Predator 2, but the runner-up for me, the one that didn't quite win, there might be a hint as to what the winner might be, but the runner-up for 1990 for me is Child's Play 2. This is my favorite in the Child's Play franchise, so it was a very difficult decision to not make it number one. However, I had to go with my gut and put Child's Play 2 as my runner-up for 1990, right? Is that where we are? Yeah, 1990. I deeply love that movie. I love Brad Dourif. I love the Good Guy Factory scene at the end. I love so many lines. Goddamn women drivers is something that I quote to this day from that movie.
You goddamn women drivers!
I don't know that a lot of people know that it's a quote from that movie, so I usually get a lot of ugly looks for that. But yeah, Child's Play 2, the best looking Chucky with the knife hand. I adore that movie. However, there is one movie that, and a lot of these are going to come down to how much I would rewatch a certain movie, and I think I might have mentioned that before, but nonetheless, in this one, I would rewatch the most, and I really, really love the original Tremors, in case the shirt wasn't a tip-off there. Tremors in 1990 dropped. It was, Val and Earl, two charismatic actors, especially one in Kevin Bacon, and then a southwestern town in Perfection, Nevada that wasn't far off of what Arizona looked like around where I grew up. Very desert ranches and things like that where graboids could perpetuate. So I was keyed into it. They are essentially land sharks, and sharks are the scariest thing to me, so I had nightmares about them. I love the graboids. The effects in the original Tremors are so good. Before they went any kind of digital, it was all practical, really cool worm effects, tunneling through the ground effects, enjoyable small town characters. I absolutely love Tremors. It holds a special place in my heart. We're actually in the process of working on a Tremors themed video that might be musical in nature. We shall find out again in the not too distant future. It's been in pre-production for a while, but Robert and I are working hard on it behind the scenes, so hopefully that'll get around sooner than later. But yes, Tremors is my favorite horror movie from 1990. So 1991 was another one of those slimmer years for horror. You did have Cape Fear starring Robert De Niro, but some people don't necessarily consider that a horror movie. You also had Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs, which sticks to a lot of people today. I think they're finally getting around to remaking that under the Jordan Peele umbrella of some kind, if I'm not terribly mistaken as of recording this. But then you also had my runner-up of 1991, which was The Silence of the Lambs. Yes, that's my runner-up, but that obviously launched Hannibal Lecter. It didn't launch Hannibal Lecter. Technically, Hannibal was in the original Manhunter movie, but it launched Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, which was a mainstay throughout many years after that, and he is still widely associated with the role. So, Silence of the Lambs starring Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster. What else can you possibly say? And absolutely, that's in the tops, but Not my favorite, just my runner-up. My favorite of 1991, if my shirt can be any indication, is Child's Play 3. Again, against those movies, I'll take Child's Play 3 over People Under the Stairs, over Cape Fear, and yes, even over The Silence of the Lambs. I'll watch Child's Play 3. It's just more fun. I love Chucky. I don't know what else to say about it. He is dominating this list, but I don't care. I love those movies. I love Child's Play 3. Come at me, bro. Here we are in 1992. Lots of good choices here as well, but it was very clear-cut in my opinion. The runner-up was Army of Darkness. I love Ash. I love the Evil Dead series, and this is where continued down the more comedic route, but I didn't mind that at all. I really love Bruce Campbell in this movie, the silliness of this movie, the schlockiness of this movie, the effects of this movie, you know, all the skeletons and all that good stuff, even the funny stuff in the graveyard, the Klaatu Barata, you know, all that stuff. I love Army of Darkness, but it's still not my favorite. Again, my shirts are going to be kind of tipping off you guys as to what my favorites are, but Candyman came out in 1992, and I adore this movie. He is one of my favorite slashers. I'm super excited about that movie once we do finally get it after all the delays due to COVID, not due to, you know, bad things behind the scenes. But I love Candyman, the whole Bloody Mary aspect of it, where you say his name 5 times in the mirror and then he comes and kills you. It kept me from doing it for years. Many other people are the same way as far as that goes, but I love Candyman, and so definitely it's my favorite horror movie of 1992. He'll get you from groin to gullet. Now, 1993 was a bit of a sparse year for horror that I found mention-worthy, so I don't know, maybe it was for you too, maybe not. But the movies I'm going to talk about, of course, there was Leprechaun this year, but going straight to my runner-up, both my runner-up and my winner for 1993, neither of which might be considered horror for some of you, but I think they're both definitely qualified as kids' horror, so I'm going to go with it. 1993's runner-up for me was Hocus Pocus. Yes, it's a comedy, but it also has horror elements. The witches are after the kids, and when I was younger, Billy the zombie scared me, you know, like, I don't know. I enjoyed the movie, and I kind of feel like it could be considered kids' horror. Again, it's a very thin year for horror this year. And then, obviously, my number one, if my shirt is any indication, for 1993 is Jurassic Park. Again, some of you may say that's not really horror, it's sci-fi action, adventure, whatever. Look, there's people getting eaten by dinosaurs in front of other people. You're running for your life, trying to escape this island. Yes, it's more adventure-y than most horror movies are, but that is a horrifying scenario. If I've ever thought to have been stuck in one, that is a horror scenario. So whether you agree or not, my favorite horror movie of 1993 is Jurassic Park. 1994 was a little bit easier for me, even though there were still a number of horror movies that came out. It wasn't one of the biggest years. So I would say that the runner-up for me on this one is In the Mouth of Madness, John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. I really enjoyed this movie ever since the first time I watched it. It was twisted. It was really one of the earliest twisted horror movies I could remember watching. Obviously, 1994, at the time, I would have been 14, although this might have come out when I was still 13 that year. So I don't remember exactly when it was, but whenever it was, it stuck with me. The Lovecraftian creatures at the end, right? They're supposed to be Lovecraftian, that are coming towards the door. Those things always scared me. The fact that Sam Neill, a guy that was so strong in Jurassic Park just the previous year, ends up completely losing his marbles and going insane in this movie the very next year. So I was like totally thrown off. I was like, wow, this is some evil stuff. But I also loved the nuances of the Sutter Kane Stephen King comparison. Although, you know, I knew of Stephen King obviously as a horror guy, but I wasn't reading his books or anything. So I appreciated the connection rather than really connecting with it because I was a Stephen King fan. But still, all of it coalesced in such a fantastic horror movie. So definitely my runner-up, but Not my favorite from that year. My favorite from that year, again, a couple of hints on the set as to what this one might be, and that is, of course, the year that Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out. This movie revitalized the Nightmare franchise for me and for a lot of people. It was the only horror movie that my dad ever went with me to go see in the theater, so it holds a special place in my heart for that as well. And if you didn't know, I happen to be making a sequel fan film to it called Dylan's New Nightmare, so I do very much love Wes Craven's New Nightmare. The meta-ness behind it was pre-Scream. It was like his test run of the meta-ness before diving headlong into changing the horror genre yet again with Scream. So Wes Craven has all of that clever Scream meta-ness, and a lot of people don't give it credit for that. So I love it. It's got Robert Englund playing both himself and the entity that chooses to form itself after Freddy Krueger. Heather Langenkamp playing herself, but also playing Nancy one last time. Of course, young at the time Miko Hughes playing Dylan, and all of the behind-the-scenes stuff is another reason I love the movie. Someone that enjoys the idea of making films, getting to see all of the behind-the-scenes of how the sets work, and the guys, Chuck and Terry, that were doing the claw and stuff, their department just off screen, and all of this stuff was like magic for me as a budding wannabe filmmaker at the time. So I loved this movie, and all of these reasons are why it's my favorite horror movie of 1994. So with 1995, you're kind of in the middle of this weird period for horror where it's all very kind of similar feeling. It's being taken more seriously, but it is, not all the way there, so there's still a lot of schlock. Like the ones from this year, you had Species, you had Lord of Illusions, you had Screamers. All of those had a very particular feel, along with my runner-up, which had, at the time, my introduction to Viggo Mortensen, as well as what, I don't know if it was it wasn't my introduction to Kristopher Walken, because that had to have been Batman Returns, but it was my first time seeing Kristopher Walken take on a role where I was like, wow, this guy can be scary, because he played Gabriel in The Prophecy, and Viggo Mortensen played Satan, believe it or not. Strider from the Lord of the Rings movies played Satan back in the day, and he has one of the creepiest deliveries where he's like, I love you more than Jesus, as he's got blood all over his mouth.
I love you more than Jesus.
It's a really cool movie, really disturbing, and we reviewed it within the last year or two on the channel as a revisit, and I really enjoyed it again. I was like, this movie is better than I remembered. Like, I remember it being good, but I didn't remember all the reasons why. But there's so many cool things, the little touches, like the fact that all the angels, when they show up, they end up perching on things like birds, because, they've got the wings, they're very bird-like kind of things. So I liked those little attention to details, and I liked Kristopher Walken playing just I don't care about humans angel that can burn things alive in Gabriel. So The Prophecy is a really enjoyable movie. That's why it's my runner-up. Not my favorite movie of the year, though. My favorite movie of 1995 in the horror genre is one that I know a lot of you guys like. It's one that when it gets brought up, everyone usually talks very fondly of it. So I don't know, but I don't know that it would be your favorite over the ones that I just listed. And generally the ones that I'm talking about as we're going through here are ones that I considered to be the best horror of that year. So there are other horror movies that came out in these years that I might not have even mentioned, and those just don't even register as much for me. So this one is none other than the tie-in to the TV show that I was not watching at the time, but it is Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. This is one that introduced me to Tales from the Crypt because I don't think I had HBO, so I didn't get to watch it, but I did watch this in the theater, and I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with William Sadler as an actor in the horror genre. He was awesome. This is the first time we saw Thomas Hayden Church. It also had Jada Pinkett, back when she was just Jada Pinkett, not Jada Pinkett Smith yet. It had a very young and cool demon, Billy Zane, right? He was the leader of the demons, but he was so charismatic, and he's fucking ho down, hey them there motherfuckers.
You fucking ho dunk, po dunk, well then there motherfuckers!
I love that. He was hilarious as the leader of the demons. All the other characters in the movie were really cool. It was maybe my first exposure to the elongated jaw thing that has scared me ever since, with the kid up in the attic that's reading the comics and then he turns demon and his jaw is like huge. So I love Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight, and the recent movie The Nun actually stole the climax, the ending, from Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight, and so Hollywood still remembers. So I hope you guys do too, because yeah, absolutely, my favorite horror movie of 1995 is Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. 1996 had some good choices as well. You had The Craft, which is, you know, one of the better witch movies that I remember seeing, especially growing up. You had The Frighteners, classic Peter Jackson, Michael J. Fox, funny movie with some really cool, scary stuff in there. But you got to go to the two biggest in 1996, and that to me was From Dusk Till Dawn being the runner-up. I really adore From Dusk Till Dawn. It's a classic movie. The first half is definitely a different movie from the second half, but I really enjoy that about it. But especially the second half, when you get to the strip club full of vampires doing all kinds of crazy, gory stuff, balls to the wall. There's a band playing corpses of people as instruments, and you just can't get better than that. It's one of, if not the best, vampire movie of all time. Absolutely love From Dusk Till Dawn. However, it is not my favorite horror movie of 96. My favorite horror movie of 96 is probably expectedly Scream, the follow-up to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which I loved so much. It's Wes Craven, my favorite horror director of all time, and it is him redefining the horror genre yet again with the meta-ness about the slashers, the awareness of the victims, that they're in a slasher movie essentially, and great characters, a great final girl in Neve Campbell, Sidney Prescott, great supporting characters with David Arquette and Courtney Cox, and Jamie Kennedy still in this first movie. So Scream is a classic for a reason, and there's a reason it's my favorite horror movie of 1996, without a doubt. So 1997, you guys, is such a crazy year for horror that I couldn't even bother trying to remember all of the movies I wanted to write down. It is easily in contention with 86, 87, and 88 as far as the number of good horror movies that came out. So let me run through. Forgive me for bringing this out, but I had to for this because there's so many. So some of these, again, are just maybe personal favorites. Some of you might think they're terrible, but nonetheless, they all made waves in the horror genre this year. American Werewolf in Paris, Anaconda, Spawn, you had Scream 2, you had Mimic, I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Devil's Advocate, The Night Flyer, Cube, The Relic, and then finally down to my favorite two of the year, which is going to start off with my runner-up, Wishmaster. So Wishmaster, I didn't even remember that it was a Wes Craven product, but it is, and I really enjoyed it. Andrew Divoff, that played the Djinn, was so good, and I still haven't been able to meet him, but I really want to one day. He was just at Mad Monster Carolina this year, so hopefully he'll make it to Mad Monster Arizona as well. But yeah, the Wishmaster movies, I really enjoy. I always love that mechanic where you have to figure out how to beat a guy that grants wishes, and so her way to beat him at the end is to just wish that a dude that caused everything because he was drinking on the job just wasn't drinking on the job that day, and it resets everything. It was really good writing. You had some really fun cameos. You had Kane Hodder show up. Tony Todd showed up as well. There was a number of horror guys that showed up in Wishmaster. So it's a lot of fun, who can you spot kind of moments. The Djinn design himself is really cool. I've always been a big fan of what the Djinn looks like. The wishing stone, the little ruby thing is really cool. So I really enjoy Wishmaster, but it is still not my favorite horror movie of 97. My favorite one is one that I know a lot of you guys love as well. I personally think it holds up. Some of the digital effects are a little bit rough, but obviously it was 1997, but it's also one that people have been clamoring forever for a director's cut to, but unfortunately the footage that would make that possible was burned in a fire, and no one's been able to recover it, including, I believe, Arrow has been planning a big special release of this movie for this year. Might have even been out by the time that this episode airs, but I'm talking about Event Horizon. Sam Neill, Lawrence Fishburne, lots of really cool actors, a spaceship that was sent out, the first to try and go through a wormhole, and then it reappears many, many years later. And so this salvage team is going to try and figure out what happened and salvage what they can. And it turns out that the ship, when it went through the wormhole, it actually traveled through hell and brought something back with it. It's a great horror movie. Lots of cool scares, lots of cool effects, and I think it still holds up. So yeah, it's one of the best space horror movies ever made, and so Event Horizon, definitely my favorite horror movie of all of the ones in 1997. 1998, guys, was another one of those, not the biggest year for horror. You did have Bride of Chucky come out, you had Deep Rising, you had the original Urban Legend, which a lot of people like, but the movies that I'm going to talk about are none of those, obviously. So my runner-up for this year is going to be the action horror movie Blade. Don't tell me that's not a horror movie. It's vampires eating people, people getting cut in half. I mean, it's an action horror movie, and it is good fun. It's frankly what kept Marvel alive to get to the new Marvel era that we have right now. Wesley Snipes was awesome. Kristopherson, I think that's his name. Either that or that's the singer. I don't know. Maybe he's both. Whatever. He was a good second to Wesley Snipes in all of the movies that he was in. I can't remember if it was just 2 or 3 of them. But I enjoyed the heck out of Blade. It is a roaring good time even to this day. So definitely that's my runner-up. But my favorite horror movie of 1998 is going to be The Faculty. Robert Rodriguez produced, and did he direct this one too? I think he directed it as well. But nonetheless, it is an excellent Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of movie, and it had a lot of people that you know today when they were younger, namely Elijah Wood. It's got a great big alien effect at the end. It is just such a fun movie, and it holds up to this day. So The Faculty is my favorite horror movie of 1998. '99 was another not so bad year for horror. It actually was the year that the found footage genre was re-kicked off with the Blair Witch Project. You also had End of Days starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Gabriel Byrne playing the devil himself. A great turn of both. You had the launch of the alligator crocodile series. I can't remember which. I think alligator series called Lake Placid. The very first installment was that year as well. None of those are my favorite or runner-up. No. My runner-up for this year, and I'm of course wearing a Kevin Smith. 1999 was pretty peak Kevin Smith as well. My runner-up for this year is going to be Idle Hands, starring Devon Sawa and Jessica Alba. Be Still My Beating Heart. Jessica Alba was a crush for a long time. I absolutely adored that girl. She was right in my age bracket, and she was gorgeous in Idle Hands. Devon Sawa, obviously a character or a guy that I warmed up to, especially after Final Destination. So I was on board for this. You also had Seth Green appearing in this at Seth Green's sort of height as well, although he's continued to have a career for many, many years after that. I adore Idle Hands. I had such a good time with that movie, but it is still not my favorite horror movie of 1999. No, if you guys forgot, we got the idea of Samuel L. Jackson not necessarily being such a badass that he survives to the end of every single movie that he makes. I'm talking about Deep Blue Sea. That's right, that magical shark movie where Samuel L. Jackson was gobbled up right in front of everyone's eyes completely unexpectedly. You had LL Cool J, you had a pre-Punisher Thomas Jane, you had a lot of really cool actors, even Michael Rappaport, pre-crazy looking dog in his yard frame.
What the fuck is that, a fucking cat?
So Deep Blue Sea was a classic. It maintains its classicity at this point in 2021. I love that movie, and I stand by it being the best horror movie of 1999. So that's going to do it for the 90s, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to be back next time for the aughts. That is going to be 2000 through 2009. I hope you're enjoying this. I had a good time putting this together. And again, This whole thing was over 2 hours when it was all combined into one, so I figured doing it by decade was the good way to go. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button and subscribe. Make sure you have that notification bell ding so you don't miss the third part rather when it comes out. Thank you so much to all of our patrons. We greatly appreciate your support of the channel. You know, we couldn't do it without you, quite frankly. So until next time, I've been Cecil Laird, and remember, stay scared.